Welcome back. Today we're exploring a chilling case that shook Oklahoma in 2017, one that continues to reverberate through the annals of true crime. As a witness in the subsequent trial would later say, he stood there, not a hint of remorse in his eyes, and tried to tell us we'd never understand what really happened. It was the kind of statement that leaves a courtroom silent, the sort of line that lingers in your mind long after you leave the courthouse steps. In many ways, the murder of Sarah Harris at the hands of her boyfriend Ryan Mitchell was not just a crime. It was a test of the community's moral compass and a harrowing look at what can occur behind closed doors when no one is watching. The year 2017 was a period of steady growth for Tulsa, Oklahoma. New businesses were popping up on Cherry Street, cultural festivals were flourishing downtown, and it seemed the city's future was bright. Yet beneath the surface of civic optimism, simmering just below that veneer, was a reminder that even in places where neighbors know each other's names and children play safely in the park, evil can take root. Yet activists remained hopeful that all was not lost. In the end, the case of Sarah Harris and Ryan Mitchell shocked the public because it struck at the very heart of domestic life. This was not a random attack on a lonely stretch of highway, nor a break-in gone awry. It was a murder that occurred in a modest apartment on a quiet Saturday evening among people who should have loved and protected one another. What made this crime so notorious was how normal the couple seemed to friends and acquaintances. By all outward measures, Sarah Harris, a 28-year-old administrative assistant at a local insurance firm, was a well-liked, responsible young woman, and Ryan Mitchell, a 31-year-old warehouse supervisor, was hardly the type that anyone pegged as a killer, until it suddenly became the headline that no one could ignore. The evidence that would later emerge cast a long shadow over their time together, revealing control, jealousy, and moments of quiet violence. The public fascination with this case endures because it touches a nerve that everyone can feel, the possibility that someone you think you know intimately might harbor a darkness you can barely comprehend. The murder itself, the subsequent investigation, and the trial that followed would leave a legacy on Oklahoma's law enforcement practices. Improved training on domestic violence intervention, more thorough background checks on certain types of offenders, and even heightened awareness in the community about warning signs, these were all results that can be traced back to the shock generated by Sarah's death. The story remains haunting partly because it defies easy explanation. Was this a crime of passion that erupted from an argument, or a premeditated act by a manipulative and controlling partner? Investigators, prosecutors, and even the public have wrestled with these questions for years. Now let's step back into the summer of 2017 and reconstruct the events as they unfolded. We do so not to sensationalize or exploit this tragedy, but to understand it more fully, to shed light on how law enforcement and the justice system respond to domestic homicide, and to reflect on what lessons remain for us today. In May of 2016, Sarah Harris and Ryan Mitchell met at a mutual friend's birthday party in Broken Arrow, a suburb just southeast of Tulsa. They hit it off quickly, bonding over shared tastes in music and enjoying a few nights out at a local craft beer bar. Sarah's friends recalled that Ryan seemed polite, a bit quiet, but genuinely interested in settling down. Neither had a checkered past, at least not one that anyone knew of at the time. Sarah, originally from Bartlesville, had moved to Tulsa for better career opportunities. Ryan, who grew up in Oklahoma City, had come to Tulsa for a job in logistics and warehouse management. By the fall of 2016, they had decided to share an apartment at the River Oaks Apartments complex off E 53rd Street. Nothing seemed unusual about their relationship, no flashing lights or obvious trouble that friends could see. Yet neighbors would later testify that there were occasional shouting matches emanating from the unit. A woman named Maria Lopez, who lived next door, described hearing muffled arguments that would sometimes spill into the hallway. I remember once, it must have been late July 2017, I heard something break and her voice screaming, "Stop, Ryan, you're scaring me." Then I heard him mumble something, and it just went quiet. At the time, Maria chalked it up to a couple going through a rough patch. She never imagined the argument was the prelude to something far worse. It's important to note a particular date when their relationship seemed to take a public turn for the worse: July 15, 2017. On that evening, Sarah and Ryan went out for dinner and drinks at a place called the Rusted Horse Bar and Grill, a casual joint in downtown Tulsa known for its smoky live music sets and cold beer. James Forrest, the bartender on duty that night, would recall how the couple started off affectionate but grew visibly tense as the night wore on. Ryan: "Around 11 p.m., I saw them have this hushed argument by the jukebox," James later testified. "She looked upset, kind of afraid, and he looked, I don't know, his face was just blank, like he was done explaining himself." According to James, Ryan left abruptly, leaving Sarah behind to settle the tab. She seemed embarrassed and rattled when she came to pay, her hands shaking as she tried to pull out her credit card. That was a month before the murder. On August 12, 2017, Sarah and Ryan were scheduled to attend a friend's housewarming party. They never showed up. Calls and texts from friends went unanswered. On August 13, when Sarah failed to appear at work without calling in sick, her co-worker Angela Martin became concerned. It was entirely out of character for Sarah to ghost anyone, especially her employer. Angela, who considered Sarah a friend, drove over to the River Oaks apartments that afternoon. She knocked several times with no answer. Concerned but unsure of what to do next, she contacted the apartment manager, Marcus Reed. Marcus retrieved his master key and, accompanied by Angela, and eventually the police, entered the apartment. What they found would remain etched in their minds forever. Sarah Harris's body lay on the living room floor, partially concealed by a blanket. There were bruises on her neck, indicating strangulation, and some signs of a struggle: overturned furniture, a broken lamp. The door wasn't forced, and nothing of value seemed missing. This didn't look like a robbery. Marcus described the scene later. "I'd never seen anything like it. She was just there, lifeless. It broke my heart." The police quickly cordoned off the apartment, initiating a homicide investigation. Since Ryan Mitchell was her partner and nowhere to be found, he immediately became a person of interest. The following days were a flurry of activity. Detective Susan Ramirez, a seasoned investigator in the Tulsa Police Department's homicide unit, took charge of the case. Ramirez was known for her meticulous attention to detail and for having a knack of getting inside a suspect's head. Her partner, Detective Alan Thompson, brought years of experience to the table, having solved numerous domestic violence homicides before. Early leads weren't promising. Ryan Mitchell had seemingly vanished. No obvious footprints, no text message confession, no tearful call to a family member. He'd simply gone off the grid. On August 17th, a break came in the form of security footage from a gas station off I-44 where Ryan's credit card was used. The footage showed him calmly pumping gas, alone. Meanwhile, the community reeled. Tulsa news stations covered the case extensively. The Tulsa World newspaper ran front-page stories on the murder for days, describing Sarah's pleasant demeanor and her close ties to family and colleagues. The public reacted with a mix of grief and anger, lighting candles at a makeshift memorial outside her apartment building. Was Ryan a secret abuser who finally snapped? Was there some love triangle that no one knew about? The chatter intensified when police announced, on August 20, 2017, that Ryan Mitchell had been apprehended in a motel near Oklahoma City, about 100 miles away. He was brought back to Tulsa County Jail on suspicion of murder. In the weeks that followed, the prosecution's case began to take shape. Police collected forensic evidence, strands of Sarah's hair clutched in her own hand, suggesting she fought back. Fingerprints and skin cells under her fingernails indicated a struggle. Forensic expert Dr. Melanie Coe testified that the pattern of bruising on Sarah's neck was consistent with manual strangulation, likely inflicted by someone with a strong grip and a calm, methodical approach. This wasn't a quick scuffle ending in tragedy. It looked more like a sustained act of violence. What set this murder apart, and what continues to fascinate true crime followers, was the eerie calm with which it was carried out. There was no weapon, no gunshot fired in a moment of passion. Instead, Ryan Mitchell used his bare hands. Strangulation is an intensely personal form of killing, intimate, face-to-face, leaving no doubt about the killer's intent. This fact alone disturbed the public deeply. Many theorized that this represented a twisted form of control. The first theory: he lost his temper during an argument about finances or fidelity, and in a sudden moment of rage he strangled her. Another theory proposed premeditation. He might have planned to kill her because he suspected she was going to leave him, removing what he saw as his possession rather than losing her. A third, more convoluted theory suggested he was attempting to stage a break-in or a robbery scenario, but panicked and fled. None of these theories offered comfort, only uncertainty and more questions. In many cases, killers who strangle their victims leave behind a kind of signature, if only in their method. Ryan didn't leave cryptic notes or call in taunts to the police, but his acts before and after the murder suggested a pattern of controlling behavior. Friends who later stepped forward recalled that Ryan often isolated Sarah from them. They noticed her losing weight, appearing anxious, receiving constant texts from Ryan checking on her whereabouts. Domestic violence experts who examined the case postulated that psychological control was a big part of Ryan's modus operandi. He didn't need a public signature, because the control was private, exerted day after day until it culminated in murder. No ritualistic elements were found at the scene, no rearranged furniture beyond what occurred during the struggle, no posed body. Yet the very absence of these stylized components made the killing more chilling. It suggested a quiet determination. If he communicated with anyone, it never came to light. There were no letters to the press, no taunting phone calls to police. His only communication was his attempt to flee, which ultimately failed. Psychologically, prosecutors believed that Ryan might have viewed Sarah as an extension of himself, a possession rather than a person with agency. When that illusion was threatened, perhaps she threatened to leave, he responded with lethal force. This psychological aspect is what still draws criminologists back to the case. The crime scene offered no puzzle pieces beyond the violent act itself, leaving the experts to reconstruct the killer's mindset through interviews, digital footprints, and whatever Ryan revealed, or refused to reveal, during interrogations. In terms of investigation, the Tulsa Police Department took a straightforward yet thorough approach. Once the homicide team, led by Detective Ramirez, secured the crime scene, they canvassed the building and neighborhood. They interviewed neighbors like Maria Lopez, who confirmed hearing arguments. They pulled phone records and scoured Sarah's text messages, finding conversations with friends that hinted at fear. "He's been on edge lately, I'm worried," she wrote to a friend on August 5, 2017. Forensics teams examined hair fibers, fingerprints, and even the position of furniture. Dr. Koh's analysis of the bruising patterns, combined with the broken lamp and scattered personal items, told a story of a deadly struggle. The department also used digital forensic methods to analyze security footage from nearby businesses and cross-referencing credit card usage. They checked Ryan's cell tower signals to trace his movements after the murder. One of the major investigative breakthroughs occurred when police discovered Ryan's car abandoned near a bus station. Surveillance footage from the station's cameras showed him boarding a bus toward Oklahoma City. Working with Oklahoma City police, Tulsa detectives located him at a rundown motel on August 20, 2017, ending the short manhunt. Once in custody, Ryan was interrogated. He was evasive, offering vague denials and shifting stories. He claimed he'd left the apartment after a heated argument, and someone else must have broken in. Detective Alan Thompson recalled that Ryan never shed a tear, never asked about Sarah's condition, and never expressed concern for her well-being. Early in the investigation, some outlandish theories surfaced. A few tabloid-style websites hinted that Sarah might have been involved in illicit activities, that perhaps she owed money to dangerous people. The defense attempted to push a narrative that Sarah suffered from depression, or that the scene could have been a suicide staged to look like murder, an argument easily dismantled by forensic evidence. Another controversial aspect was the defense team's insinuation that Sarah's character was questionable. This victim-blaming angle angered the community and domestic violence advocacy groups. Protests and editorials in the local media criticized these tactics, reinforcing that the victim's integrity should never be put on trial. Despite some initial confusion, the investigators never seriously entertained any suspects other than Ryan Mitchell. The neighbors who heard arguments, the forensics at the scene, the suspicious flight afterward, these all pointed toward him. There were no strange fingerprints, no forced entry, and no one else with a clear motive. Before his capture, some speculated about a mystery intruder or a jilted ex-lover, but these theories evaporated as more evidence emerged. The timeline and physical evidence formed a nearly unassailable case. First of all,
from start to finish, the media covered every twist. Local TV stations ran segments with body language experts analyzing Ryan's every move. Newspapers quoted domestic violence organizations who urged anyone feeling trapped in abusive relationships to seek help. The public responded with anger, sorrow, and a renewed willingness to demand justice for Sarah Harris. Petitions circulated calling for tougher sentences in domestic violence cases. On social media, people swapped stories of times they suspected abuse in their own communities, vowing to act if they saw warning signs. The entire process galvanized awareness in ways that few other cases had done. As the trial approached, officially opening on May 1, 2018, anticipation was high. In court, prosecutors laid out their evidence methodically. They presented Sarah as a kind, responsible person who became trapped in a relationship with an increasingly controlling partner. Witnesses like Angela Martin confirmed Sarah's recent fear. The prosecution showed phone records documenting a spike in aggressive text messages from Ryan in the weeks leading up to the murder. Maria Lopez's testimony about the July argument humanized the mounting tension. Experts like Dr. Coe detailed the medical certainty of homicide by strangulation.
The defense struggled, offering no plausible alternative suspect. They tried to argue technicalities and suggested that without direct eyewitnesses, the state couldn't be sure of Ryan's guilt. But circumstantial evidence, combined with forensics, painted an overwhelming picture. On July 10, 2018, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Ryan Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Even after the conviction, this case refused to fade from public consciousness. In the years following, new forensic tools emerged, like more advanced DNA analysis and improved digital data retrieval methods. Although the case was already solved, these modern developments offered opportunities to reanalyze evidence and confirm the solidity of the verdict. Recent breakthroughs in understanding psychological profiles of domestic abusers have further contextualized Ryan's behavior. While no new suspects have emerged, this was never a whodunit. It remains a reference point in criminology textbooks and police training seminars. Modern analysis of the old evidence has reinforced the initial conclusions. Reviewing the case files with today's technology, experts have found no errors in the investigation. If anything, it stands as a testament to meticulous police work. Still, some independent researchers have tried to explore Ryan's psyche through new psychological lenses. Could he have had an undiagnosed personality disorder? Could earlier intervention have saved Sarah's life? None of these questions change the outcome, but they continue to stir discussion. Media interest resurfaces from time to time, usually around anniversaries or when domestic violence legislation comes to the forefront. The murder of Sarah Harris and the conviction of Ryan Mitchell have found a place in larger conversations about prevention, education, and the legal system's role in protecting victims. Some true crime authors have written chapters about this case in anthologies, focusing on domestic homicides. You have speculated what might have happened if Sarah's coworkers or neighbors had reported their suspicions sooner. This kind of what-if pondering doesn't lessen the tragedy, but keeps the story alive as a cautionary tale. The cultural impact of Sarah Harris's murder on Oklahoma, and indeed on the broader true crime community, has been profound. Several books, and at least one low-budget documentary film, have touched upon the case, highlighting its lessons about the warning signs of domestic violence. In the wake of this tragedy, local law enforcement agencies increased training for officers responding to domestic disturbance calls, teaching them to look for patterns of coercive control rather than waiting for physical harm to occur. The public's consciousness was also raised. People became more vigilant about looking out for friends, co-workers, and neighbors who might be suffering behind closed doors. The legacy of this case in true crime history is that it stands as a grim reminder that the most shocking crimes can happen anywhere, even in quiet apartment complexes. It also demonstrates the importance of community awareness and the potential for media coverage to galvanize positive changes. Even today, when someone stumbles across old newspaper clippings or forum posts about Sarah and Ryan, the emotional weight of what happened reawakens. Reflecting on the implications of this case, one must remember the human cost. A vibrant young woman lost her life at the hands of someone who should have cared for her. The subsequent trial, conviction, and incarceration of Ryan Mitchell cannot restore Sarah's life. But they can remind us that justice, though imperfect, strives to hold perpetrators accountable. This story underscores that domestic abuse should never be dismissed as just a couple fighting. It implores communities to take signs of violence seriously and to offer help before the situation escalates. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. If you find this case compelling, consider looking into similar domestic homicide cases, such as the killing of Grace Mullane in New Zealand or the murder of Gabby Doolin in Kentucky, to understand how broad and painful this issue truly is. Join the discussion in the comments section to share your thoughts, theories, and what can be learned from the tragedy of Sarah Harris and Ryan Mitchell. Each conversation contributes to the collective effort to prevent such crimes in the future.